So we're going to be painting my new skin for my Tyranid today, which is a purple skin tone with a slightly red carapace. Never really liked the old Tyranid colour scheme I had, so we'll be trying this one, and then let me know what you think. Sorry about the voice, I do have a bit of a cold at the moment. First colour we're going to start with is, I think it's Xerius Purple. We're going to use this to dry brush all over the skin. Now I am using a makeup brush, as it gives a lot less chalky finish. And take that, I'm only using a bit of scrap cardboard. Take a lot of the paint off on here. Now my brush is slightly damp. It's not drenched, but it's got a bit of moisture in there. And we're just going to take this all over the skin. Don't worry if you get on the carapace, we'll clean that up before we come to that part. Finished now, and then we'll move on to the next colour. So next colour we're going to use, I think it's called Cacophony Purple, but any light purple will do that you have. Again, using the makeup brush, I'm going to get a lot of this paint off. It's quite a stark dry brush compared to the previous one. The previous purple just gave a base for this one. It doesn't go too well over the black. Right, so let that dry, and then we'll move on. So now that's done. It is quite bright at the moment, but the now we're going to do the wash stage, so that will bring back down to a nice duller purple. So we're going to be using Drucci Violet, and we're just going to coat this all over the purple skin. Again, obviously not worrying too much about being messy, as we can tidy up for the carapace stage. Right, let's get this on. So what I'm doing is I'm working in sections. So I started with the chest, and then I'll just work on the head next, and then pick another part and do that entirely, so I know that I'm not missing anything. That's what the skin looks like now. After the purple wash has dried, it's gave it a nice gradient. So now what we'll do is we'll get a bad and black, and we're just going to clean up the carapace, ready for painting that. So I've got a bit of this on my palette, watered down, and I'm just going to touch the carapace back up. Right, so now the skin's done. What we're going to do is we're going to take a bit of corn red and we're going to dry brush this over the carapace to give that first layer. Again, damp makeup brush. I have gone for a smaller makeup brush. So I'm going for a little bit smaller, so I've got a bit more control. I'm just going to take this colour, get a lot of it off, and start dry brushing. Kind of gives it a brownish tint. So we'll get Evil Sun Scarlet next. And we're just going to dry brush that again, but only focusing on the highest points of the carapace. Then we'll take Wild Rider Red and we're just going to touch the finest edges, and this is literally going to have no paint on the brush. So what I do is just get that off on my hand, barely thin, and just lightly drag that over. For the final step of the carapace, we're just going to take a red wash, which is Caribou Crimson, and we're just going to wash that all over the carapace, just to tie those highlights in. So what we'll do now is we'll work on the face, starting with Pink Horror, and we're just going to use this to block out the tongue. Next, we're going to use green just to dot in the eyes. Now you want to keep the paint on your brush very minimal here, so not to cause any overspill onto the skin that we've already dry brushed and washed. Then Wraithbone, and we're going to use this just to touch the teeth up before we put the wash on. So here I've just got a little bit of paint on the end of my brush, and I'm literally just touching it to each tooth individually just to give it a bit of colour. So as you see here now, I'll flip the model over, so I'm making the model work for me and not the other way around. Now for the final wash, we'll use Agrax Earthshade, and we're just going to do that over the teeth and the tongue. I am using a thinner brush here as I don't want to drown the mouth and then have to go back and wick all the wash away. Just working in small sections, bit at a time. Then finally we'll take Beeltan Green, and we're just going to use this just to put a little dot over the eyes to give it a bit of shadow. Then we'll take Ogun Camo, and we're just going to focus this into the muscle areas that are shown on the model. I'm just going to focus it right in the middle, so then we can put a wash over to give it some shading. Then a quick wash with Athonian Camo shade over the areas we've just done. Keeping the wash to a minimal on your brush so that we're not drowning the area. Now we'll move on to the bone sword and lash whip. So we'll start with Wraithbone, and we'll just give this a few thin coats to build up the opacity. In total I had to do 3 thin layers to get this to the opacity that I wanted it to. I'm not too sure about this paint. It's good, but considering it's used for the contrast paints, it's not great coverage considering it's supposed to be easy. Then we'll take the Skeleton Horde contrast paint, and we use this just all over the bone sword and the lash whip, making sure to keep the paint moving so that we're not pooling too heavy in the flat areas. I do move it around a bit just by the highest point of that ridge in the middle of the sword, just so that it pulls either side, and then we can highlight it up later. Then we'll take Screaming Skull, and we're just going to use this as an edge highlight, just running the edge of your brush along all those sharp edges of the bone sword. Then finally for the bone sword, we're just going to take our grass earthshade and we're going to use it as a glaze. We'll place it at the bottom of the sword there, and what we'll do is then we'll wash our brush and feather it out just to give a bit of a gradient towards the base. So repeat this on both sides. Now you can add more layers of this if you do want a darker recess at the base of the sword. Okay, so now for the talons, we'll take Owen Camo and we're just going to run this down the sharpest edges of each of the talons, which were base coated in black after the dry brush. So we cleaned up, and then we're just going to take a thin Owen Camo and just run this down the edges using the side of the brush to get a nice clean line. If you do end up with the line being too thick, just quickly wash your brush and wick the paint away from the model, and then wait for it to dry and go back in and reapply. So for the final part of this model, we're just going to complete the base. We'll start with a Grill and Earth crackle paint, and we're just going to plaster that all over the underneath by the feet, trying to keep it thick in some areas so we get the bigger cracks. Then we'll take Wraithbone and we're just going to water this down, and we're going to paint this all over the base. So I'm watering it down because I do want that uneven texture, so I'm not worried about doing 2, 3 thin coats. I'm just going to do one coat, water it down and let it dry. Then once the Wraithbone's dry, we'll take Norn oil and we're just going to apply a thin wash of this all over it. I feel it looks kind of like a tundra, but it may look like a desert as well. So final step of this warrior is we're going to take a Bad and Black and we're just going to rim the edge of his base. So there we have the finished model. So it's quite a quick colour scheme. I needed something that I could paint quite quick as I'm doing a whole Tyranid army. I could have sunk a lot more time into it, but it would have just took forever to get an army together. And considering I'm repainting them all as well, it's a lot of hassle. But yeah, I like the purple skin, the reddish carapace. Bone sword, pretty happy with it. It's not great, but it'll serve its purpose. And I think I'm just going to add a bit of snow onto this base, just to give it an extra snowy kind of tundra feel. Yeah, let me know what you think. And again, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll catch you next time.